Actually, I'm going to.
Brian, I do beg your pardon, sorry.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up on some of the last points that were just raised and which echo some of the issues developed in Hala's presentation. So Alessandro, you were discussing the need for standards and the goal being not to have to reinvent the wheel every time a major challenge like this is confronted by our societies. So my question here regards the role of researchers and partnerships with other actors who are keen on accessing data of human mobility and contact. So to think about this broadly, researchers, I would say, would generally want to collect and share data that's maximally detailed. But in many cases, for legal and social reasons, it's important not to be able to unmask individuals or link data back to the level of identity of individuals who contribute or created that data. So do we yet have a general method for achieving this optimal balance between the research and public health value of movement and contact tracing data, while also obscuring or aggregating data so that individuals won't be linked or possibly harmed by surveillance or data collection efforts? My impression is that these issues are being addressed in a quite ad hoc manner. And I wonder if you think this topic deserves an organized, concerted effort by researchers and others, and if so, how such an effort might proceed. And so that's a question for both of you.
Hala, please, you wanna start? You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Sorry.
A classic. It had to happen once.
Right.
Thanks. I think yes, we need a concerted effort, and we need to do it thoughtfully. I think it's such an important question. It needs to not be treated as a, you know, too difficult to sort, leave it aside, because that won't be a solution. And in order to get to the permanent infrastructure that Alessandro was talking about, in order to not have to reinvent the wheel, and in order to get the trust of the people who, you know, we all serve eventually, we have to come up with these trusted ways. But I just want to also say, and you know, welcome sort of challenge and discussion on this, that I think we shouldn't obsess too much about this issue either, because a lot of data sets actually are not including personal data to start with. And so, you know, I wish we had faster, easier access to that kind of data set where, you know, it never involved really personal data or traceability to individuals. And I think there's so much to do that actually isn't that difficult. That I'd like to, yeah, I welcome thoughts from people on this.
Yeah, if I can chime in with a few things, you know, it's I would say on the research side, there is a lot of work that in the data science area is done to ensure privacy preserving methodologies be available to the research community. And here it's just because I want to stress the need to have multidisciplinary approaches. So here we are talking about responding to epidemics, but we need to go into something that might be very different, like data science and, you know, digital data sets, privacy, etc. Yes, we need that contribution. There are several methodologies. They are, you know, we should embark in addressing really what are the specific needs of in terms of data that we need and how to mask those data, etc. I think it's important to have all those efforts to live in the academic world, to live in the challenges world, foundations, etc. But then for me, I think at the end, it's crucial that we have brokerage. I put myself also in the shoes of major organizations that are sitting on the data, and redefining contracts and agreements with all the multitude of research groups might be very complex, you know, while if instead there is a broker, that is a place where they can say, well, I'm safe here, I feel safe to share my data in the right way with the right technologies and research, and then from that place to, how to say, to ask questions to academic groups, etc. I think everything will be much more streamlined. And my fear now is that we are seeing really many actors in the digital world that went above and beyond during the COVID-19 to provide those data to research groups. But now the problem is how we will sustain that effort and how we will continue for the future, not to abandon when this epidemic will go down, hopefully soon. And we need to foster and create the agencies that will take care of that.
Thanks a lot. Neon?
Yes, great. Thank you, Hala. Thank you, Alex, for the great talk. I really enjoyed it. So I have a question for Hala. So you introduced the Trini challenge in your presentation. So one question we have is that is the outcome of the Trini challenge mostly focused on data science integration with the public health? Or how about more broadly on policy making, informing the government, connecting the donor and sponsors to the execution team? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Thank you. That's the space we want to be playing in. And I saw that question and loved it, because that's exactly why I joined. It can be intimidating for somebody like me with no scientific background to join something that is very actually, you know, leading edge science focused. But for me, it's so incredibly important because I saw it from the government first, how much we needed sort of translation of all this knowledge that's out there in the scientific community. And so I think I definitely want the Trini challenge to play that role of shortening the feedback loop, bringing people together closer to governments. And it's going to be about what we do in the long term and over time and repeat, but it's also about relations and personalities. I think they matter too. And so we shouldn't underestimate. So Sally Davies, who's our chair, has built a sort of career and reputation on actually really working well between the science community, and she's on top of the concepts and she understands them, and government, and bringing in you know, society and NGOs and business as well. And that ability to translate is incredibly important. And with a bit of leadership from you know, the right places, I think you can make a lot of progress pretty quickly.
Great, thank you, Hala. Brian?
Yeah, I have a question for Alessandro, and this is building on some of the material that was covered in yesterday's workshop when we described the full systemic understanding of the emergence of a pandemic. It involves, at the very earliest stages, patterns of disease transmission among non-human species, and then spillover events into those human communities that come in contact with these pathogens. And there's a very robust research community in movement ecology and epidemiology and in veterinarian sciences that are focusing on that leading edge of the initial outbreak. And I'm just wondering, from a sort of institutional and scientific and collaboratory sense, whether you think you currently have collaborations across the fields of social science into the biological sciences, and whether there's an opportunity there that you recognize for greater collaboration with such research and sharing of tools and methodologies, and possibly the development of sensors that could have these uses across the full spectrum.
Well, I think that's a very important question. I think we don't have to look at pandemic response as something that is in sectors or bracket, you know. So I think it's a continuum, and it really goes from surveillance of viruses in reservoir to animal mobility, human interaction with our environment, ecology, and you know, that's actually perhaps is the most, could be the most important part. So we don't want to get to the stage that the virus is already spreading human to humans. You know, we want to act before that and try to understand the dangers of that before. And so there is more and more collaborations. Then there is all the interaction with social sciences. So what happens to us? What is the behavior? What are all the mechanisms, both during a pandemic, but also before a pandemic that might be important in the social sciences. I think, you know, I really see this as a collective effort scientifically. That it's not even what I would call interdisciplinary. So we really need all hands on deck. We need to have much more communications. For some large groups, it might be more natural to have connection. I have a lot of connection with social sciences. The institute I'm in, as we have social scientists, we have, you know, people that work in genetics, so we have everybody. But for other groups, that might not be the reality. We need to foster a community that is more, how to say, large. It is structured, and it's really devoted to that in an interdisciplinary dialogue. And my fear, and that is where I think I was again listening to Hala before on the 3D challenge and the connection with the government. My fears is always what will happen after this pandemic. You know, we have been through those moments, and I've seen, unfortunately, the exponential decay of interest and communication and and connection. And this is where you know, initiative like the Trinity one could have a big role to keep the lights on and you know, bring the torch of what has to be done in the future. And as you say, we need really the entire spectrum. You know, what was yesterday in the meeting was crucial. What it will be tomorrow is crucial. And yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I have a question regarding the social behavior of the population. We all know that we have a very large percentage of population that are kind of skeptical of the vaccination, and they even refuse to take the vaccinations, not to mention COVID-19 vaccinations, and even a lot of vaccination that has been there for decades and saving billions of lives. So I wonder if there's anything that the government can do, or if there's anything that foundations like the Trinity Challenge can do to improve the understanding of the general public, so that people can will be more willing to take the vaccinations, and so that we can get out of the pandemic earlier. So yeah, this question is for both of you.
That's a fantastic question. You know, the WHO has an entire area that now is called infodemics. You know, actually is the epidemiology of the information about the pandemic and how to we can avoid misinformation, we can communicate properly to citizens. I think this is a huge area of scientific endeavor that has, you know, where the social science is just crucial. We cannot do without it. And it's now, you know, when we are trying to draw scenarios of what happens, you know, the compliance and adherence to the vaccination campaigns is crucial. If you put 50% or 80%, is a different world. And so we need also to find ways to communicate better, for the government to reach out to people in the proper way. So this is huge. This is huge. And this is where we need all hands on deck again.
Yeah, I very much agree, and it's not one. I think it's going to be a constant project. This is not something that you sort in one go, but you know, the way we're trying to go at it with our members, and we are working on a project on exactly this. You know, how do we use our ability to use social media and news? So we have all these organizations in our coalition, including Internews, who's an NGO that specializes in media in local income countries, as well as Facebook, Tencent, Google. Everybody wants to help. The question is, how do you craft the messages in a way that is going to be different and be more impactful and not, make things even worse. And there, I think there's something from the social sciences and behavioral science and academia that's really important to bring in the rigor. But it's like we want to make a leap of faith where we're confident enough to bring the academic rigor and the work of ethnography, ethnologists, Heidi Larson, the Vaccine Confidence Project, but also with creative agencies and people who are used to marketing basically and social messaging. And it's hard, it's risky, it's not something that's super comfortable, but it's exactly what we need to do to craft these messages and then disseminate them through these really powerful platforms. But the audiences are going to be very different. You can't talk to everybody in the same way. And there's one thing that seems promising already is that, there's a lot of research into this field, right? But it's very hard to measure the impact. And we're starting to see that some of the data, the spatial data tools that Alessandra described actually can help you measure the impact on a very, very short time scale. So I issue the message to a targeted audience, and then I can see quite quickly whether they actually acted on the message and went to a vaccination center or not really quickly. So it's very beginning, but we're working on this with a very broad group within the coalition, including government and agencies.
Great, thank you very much.
I was wondering if we could zero in a little bit more into the internals of some of the key modeling frameworks that are used for modeling diffusion processes. So you mentioned the exciting research that's happening in reaction, specifically with regard to reaction diffusion methods. I wondered, Alex, if you could discuss any of the new developments in this research space. Have we seen the emergence of new techniques of modeling and simulation that you think are exciting, cutting edge developments for those of us in the computer science and engineering fields to be focusing attention on?
And just to give you a heads up, we have 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes, okay? So nice and brief, please. Thank you.
I will be very brief. What I shown is mostly, what you would call mechanistic modeling, so in which you go down to the level of the individuals, and there now we can go down to the level really of point of interest. So if you look at the metropolitan area, you can look at how many people, what is the possibility that you meet in a cafe or in a coffee place or in a restaurant or in a theater and so on and so forth. But there is an entire branch of computer science and now that try to use different approaches based more on artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep neural networks. I think the future that is emerging is a mixture of the two. For instance, you can use the mechanistic model, even more simple models like differential equation-based compartmental models, and combine with artificial intelligence algorithms that read the data and adjust the model and can take into account, perhaps in a less transparent way, but of all the, how to say, the noise and biases that we have. We all know that, the time series of cases is biased by reporting delays, number of tests that can be executed, and so on and so forth. So those methodology allows to cure for that and provide, for instance, a very nice and accurate short-term forecast. So there is a lot of moving science at the moment at the border, especially of computer science with computational and mathematical epidemiology, and data as well is crucial there. So I think it's a great moment, and we need to keep the momentum going. That's the important message for me.
Thank you. Hala, did you have a final comment on that?
No, thank you. I'll take the time.
Done. All right, well, thank you very much indeed. Hala and Alessandro, thank you very much for a round of applause from us all here for a fascinating discussion there. Fabulous.